Okay, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. What I have here is a piece of sapelli plywood, 3/4 inch thick, and I'm cutting one of two tabletops here on the CNC machine. I started out with a vector in Illustrator. The client approved the shape, and then I was able to start the project. We went through a few shapes and finally came up with one very symmetrical shape. He knew we were going to have two tables, and so this is a piece of sapelli. This whole project started out as it was going to be a piece of sapelli wood, or the whole project was going to be sapelli, and it would all be maybe hand rub with polyurethane or tung oil or something just to kind of bring out the grain. It was all about the grain. And now this is a piece of Baltic birch, which is going to be the supporting piece underneath that first cut piece. So we did two of each. The Baltic birch underneath is about $50 cheaper, so that's why we went with it. And I wanted a quality piece of plywood that would basically remain flat, so I got Baltic birch. So there you see that's 1.5 inches thick. And now I'm gluing the cutouts together. This is one set of cutouts, and of course there's a second set of cutouts. There was no need to show both of them on the CNC machine. I didn't have much confidence in this whole video and this whole project because the client was wishy-washy about it from the start. So I didn't really know if he was serious about it. So I filmed this whole thing mostly on GoPro, which is why the color is shifty so much. This is like a GoPro 4, I think. Maybe a 5, I don't know. But the color was just shitty. And GoPro color is usually bad when you're not in just regular sunlight. And this room at this time had 10 different color temperatures from every different direction. So this is 2.5, maybe, it's about 2.5 inch thick sapelli, rough cut. And this one with the project to the Bahamas. And this project, again, it was a bit wishy-washy, and then the client got serious about it, so I had all the materials, so I kind of built it in a little bit of a rush. And what I'm doing now is I'm taking that 2-inch material and I'm milling it, cutting it and milling it. Now it's all 3 inches wide, right there. It's 3 inches wide by the thickness it ends up being after it's all smoothed out and planed. And now I have the saw set to 3 inches wide. So I'm just sticking whatever two pieces will end up at 3 inches through the saw. So now each one of those pre-glued pairs add up to 3 inches wide by 3 inches wide. I don't know if that makes sense. Basically, the stock is whatever the width is, but when I pass it through the saw with another piece next to it, then I end up whatever that random piece is, and that's end up 3 inches. It's obviously dangerous to put two pieces through the fence and the blade, but you know, I don't care what people think. And so here I'm gluing those pieces together, and they're all just random sizes. You know, some of them, I never wanted a little tiny thin piece, so I kind of made sure that it was like two beefy pieces. One might be 1.25 inches, one might be 1 3/4 inches. It is just random. And just putting a lot of glue on there. A lot of people commented that I used a lot of glue in this project, and I wasn't sure how I was going to make these legs yet. I'm still supposed to get I'm trying to make the bottle stand up, and then I fake it right here with the edit. I was going to get the 5th axis jig from the guys at ShopBot, and it didn't show up. I'm still supposed to get it, but it's really up to me, and I ended up coming to LA, so that put it off for a month. And I made this in the summer, and then in the summer I just wasn't pushing them on it, and then I had to make the legs, and I had to really make a quick decision. And I was going to actually use the lathe. It occurred to me, I got this education from Izzy many years ago, just make it on the table saw, and that's really why I did that. Just for speed, and also it literally made each leg in like 3 minutes, as opposed to having to like chisel it and measure it and chisel it. And we steam bent these 1/2 inch strips, and it was difficult because the sapelli just cut out of the long raw boards had no straight grain in it. The grain split in a lot of spots, which I didn't really get into the details. No need to show it. You can kind of see it right here where you see the grain right in the crux of that curve. You see how it curves and then goes straight, but I was able to force it in and hide the crack. So it was a real pain in the ass to heat bend, and like I said, the client wanted everything to be just the natural wood tones. And I was really stumped. I didn't know how I was going to wrap those tiny corners, those tiny circumferences on the end. And then I said, let me at least get this far and then I'll deal with it. I was going to wrap the whole thing with multiple layers of really thin stuff, but I didn't think I'd get it clamped, glued together tight enough to not have any of it look delaminated or like have like a long feather with glue in it, if you understand what I mean. And so I just said, you know what, let me just bullnose those pieces with just bandsawed parts. And I'm jumping back and forth because as one thing was drying, I'd jump back and forth. So this is really the actual sequence of the edit, was the sequence of how the footage was shot, which was of course how it was built. So now I'm just roughing these down into round logs. Still not 100% sure that I'm going to just go do the old Izzy Swan method. And still thinking I was going to maybe go on the lathe. And now here I am just gluing these on. And I came up with this technique where, I guess it's a similar technique I came up with when I was working on the canoe. Put the clamp on, put the screw clamp, and bang the screw clamp in, and use either the bar on the screw clamp, that front threaded rod, to push in, or to get it real tight, and then just hammer a wedge in between that front thread and the part that I'm gluing, pushing into the edge. So the screw clamps are just towed in a little bit at the tips. They're grabbing the actual table much stronger than they are at the tips than they are at the back, and it's giving enough room for me to sometimes bang a wedge in. Sometimes I didn't need to do the wedge. A few people asked me if I left the Mar screw clamp marks on the steamed wood, and I certainly did. I had to sand past it in a lot of circumstances. In fact, after all was said and done, I saw one that I wasn't able to get completely out in the final painted piece. It was driving me nuts, but there wasn't anything I could do about it. It was very faint and nobody but me would notice it, but it was still there. I guess because it was compressed, and I sanded it out, and then that compressed wood maybe dimpled or bumped, but there was evidence of it after all was said and done. Couldn't really feel it, but you could certainly see it in the right light. Now here we are with this thing. I have a lag bolt in the top. Taylor is holding the vacuum there for me. But I have a lag bolt, and you see here I put one in. The lag bolt goes in, I drilled the hole, and the lag bolt bottoms out. And now the screw, got that screw in there, because the first couple actually screwed themselves out, so I made her put a long screw in there. Get it started, and I was getting more aggressive the more comfortable I got with it. It ended up being 1 inch taper at the bottom up to a 3 inch taper at the top. In some cases like a 2 3/4 at the top and a 1 inch at the very tip. And that's what I was going for. I was really going for a 3 at the top and a 1 at the bottom. But sometimes I got a little aggressive. So if you put a micrometer on all of the legs, they varied slightly, all within 1/4 of an inch. And it was nice to be able to just spin it. So again, tightening that lag bolt into the leg caused it to spin into the saw blade. And this was just a temporary jig. I didn't save it. It became firewood, and there was no reason to save it, because the next time I need to do this will probably be something slightly different. And here you see I'm just using an X-Acto knife to get that exact inside curve, and wherever those other pieces of wood live, they're going to become integrated into the curve. So it's important to get those straight edges. And now there's a piece of the scrap, just making sure that I cut it at least as thick as it, so everything has a fighting chance of being similar size. And by now this is maybe the second set I've done. I did the first table already, and now I'm doing the second set. So go to school on the first one. So now I'm a pro. You'll notice I chipped off the back corners there a little bit, and helps it go in easier. And I put some wood fill up underneath, really just so you don't feel a gap if you're at the edge of the table. And the hot glue was a big win there. Let the hot glue cure and then squeeze it all in. There was a lot of sawdust mixed with glue on this one. Again, still right up until this moment anticipating having to have this all exposed wood. Wasn't going to paint it white. Slowly started talking to the client about, oh, what do you think, can we whitewash it? I saw something, I wanted it to be whitewashed. I'm not so sure the wood's going to be too blonde in this room, because what changed the client's mind is that some of the stuff in the room changed colors. And you see there, I'm just using that little Lie-Nielsen hand plane. I use that for most of the canoe build too. It's a great little plane. If you only want to buy one plane, buy that little gold plane. It just kicks major ass. And of course, the belt sander was a big fan. I was a big fan of the belt sander. And you see here I have 1/4 inch plates. I'm drilling 3 tight holes in the middle and 4 around the edge. And you notice this 1/4 inch angle iron by 3, and I cut off most of one side and left a little kick up, which causes the legs to not be flat. And this is the second attempt. The first attempt I used 1/8 inch steel and the legs were too wobbly. Be absolutely honest with you. And so I went to 1/4 inch steel and the legs were much more sturdy. The table in general was a tad wobbly, but it was much more wobbly when those plates were 1/8 inch. There was just more flex right at that top there. 1/4 inch soaked a lot of that up. You know, it might look like I'm just randomly placing them. I did 10 tests to get this to where I want. You could see the holes there from the previous plate. You can see them right there under that plate. So this was a lot of trial and error on this project to try and make these simple tables. It was a real pain in the butt. And the client wanted 4 legs. I talked him into 3 because 4 legs obviously never would have sit correctly in my room. Then in his room it would have been different. And of course most of these tables, after I looked up, I had to convince him they only have 3 legs. And he's really easygoing. He's a very easygoing client overall. He's the guy who got the big long table, and then the previous video, the walnut table. He's probably, I made the most money with him, and he's probably the easiest client I ever had. He said, "You wanted them white? You want them white? I'll make them white. What do I care?" He has to be happy. He has to live with them, not the YouTube audience. So here, this is my first attempt to whitewash them. So I just rolled this paint on, and then this is all water-based, natural finish, or is it general finishes. And then I had a damp rag, and I just rubbed it all in. Anyway, between that and this shot, that was probably a month, because we all decided we'd rather just see it pure white. There was too many varying tones. It just wasn't whitewashing easily because it really wasn't meant to be whitewashed. And this is just, believe it or not, high gloss Rust-Oleum enamel with little mineral spirits and 2-3 coats over the course of about 3 weeks, because you got to let it dry perfectly. And through it all, the grain kept showing back up, which was unbelievable to me because there was so much paint on it at this point. And that's Jessie. I Jess up. She was hanging out for a couple of weeks during the summer. And ultimately, after a lot of stress, I was very happy with this. That's why this video took so long to put out, because it just, the whole thing stressed me out. And a couple commenters noticed that I seemed stressed out in this video, and I certainly was. So thank you for supporting me here on Patreon, and I'll see you again shortly. Thank you, guys.